Coming in at number 5 we have Jaws, the opening scene. Perhaps one of the most iconic opening scenes in cinematic history and one of the most disturbing, Jaws is an absolute classic, and this particular death scene is one that I can never get out of my head even if I tried. Released in 1975 and directed by Steven Spielberg, Jaws is based on the 1974 novel of the same name, and tells the story of a man-eating great white shark who begins attacking beachgoers, resulting in police chief Martin Brody hunting it down with the help of a marine biologist and a professional shark hunter. Jaws is a classic and is the movie that sparked people's universal fear of sharks and open water, with the possibility of a shark attack occurring at any moment. Now, the movie's opening most certainly sets the tone for the rest of the movie to come, with it completely shocking audiences in the process and scarring the minds of many for years to come. Jaws opens at a beach party on Amity Island in the evening, with a young woman, Chrissy, running off to go skinny dipping with a guy. However, while she is treading water, she is violently pulled under by an unseen force, but we know at this point it's a shark. She is whipped around, screaming out for help, gurgling and trying to stay above water. However, not long after, she disappears below the surface and out of sight. That is until her remains are discovered on the beach the next day. It's a violent and upsetting scene, informing us that this shark is ruthless and will attack at any time, any place, and will kill you. Just don't go in the water. Sharks will eat you wherever you go, even in swimming pools. Those are facts. Coming in at number 4, Suspiria, Olga's Death. Now, I'm specifically talking about the 2018 version, and not the superior 1977 movie, unfortunately. While I thought the 2018 remake was okay, nothing will ever top the greatness that was Dario Argento's eerie supernatural horror. Anyway, moving on, released in 2018 and directed by Luca Guadagnino, Suspiria stars Dakota Johnson as Susie Banyan, an American dancer who enrolls in a prestigious academy in Germany, which is revealed to be run by a coven of witches. Now, while I believe the 28 version doesn't come close to even touching Dario Argento's masterful work, it is still very well directed with a great cast. It's eerie, unsettling, with you left with the feeling that something just isn't quite right. It's incredibly dark, giving you no time at all to settle in, and to top it all off, it has one of the most disturbing and filthy scenes in cinematic history, that being the death of Olga. Olga is one of the first students to accuse the matrons of witchcraft, resulting in her becoming trapped in a room while Susie performs a dance for Madame Blanc, played by Tilda Swinton, who is amazing in this movie. However, witchcraft is at play in this scene, with Susie's movement inflicting harm upon Olga, resulting in her body contorting, her bones breaking, and her becoming completely mangled before being dragged away with large hooks by the other matrons. It's a hellish sequence showcasing early on what the witches at the academy are capable of, and what lengths they will go to remain hidden. Poor Olga, she deserved so much better. RIP. Before we jump into number 3, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps us out a lot, and it just shows me that you love me, and I need validation. In at number 3 we have Hereditary, The Pole. I mean, of course, this death shocked almost every single person who saw Hereditary. It still shocks me now. Released in 2018 and directed by Ari Aster, Hereditary stars Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, and Gabriel Byrne, and follows a family haunted by a mysterious presence following the death of their secretive grandmother. Now, the movie is incredibly tense and uneasy, with you feeling quite constricted, almost that you can't breathe. It's a slow burn, but at the same time so much happens that you can't quite keep up with. Throughout the movie, it is revealed that a darker force may have latched itself onto the family through the grandmother, and it is being passed on to the daughter and then to the son. But what exactly is the dark force? Could it in fact be the evil demon Payment? Perhaps, but I don't want to ruin the entire movie for you. However, what I am allowed to ruin is one particular death, the death of Charlie, the daughter. Now, Charlie is incredibly reserved, staying away from most people and hiding out in her room where she exhibits strange behaviors. And following the passing of the grandmother who played a large part in raising Charlie, she begins to retreat more. So on one particular night, when the son Peter was heading to a party, his parents forced him to take Charlie along as well. Now, this is where everything spirals out of control. After having a reaction to nuts, Charlie begins to go into anaphylactic shock, forcing Peter to speed down the road trying to get her to safety. But safety never comes, because as Charlie opens the window of the car to get air and stick her head out, a deer runs right across the road. The car swerves and Charlie's head collides with a pole, decapitating her immediately. It's all very sudden, leaving you short breath and at a loss for words. It's one moment that no one saw coming, that's for sure. Sucks. heads will roll. And that they did. Coming in at number 2, Final Destination 2, The Pipe and the Fence. Perhaps the most jarring moment on our entire list, Final Destination 2 isn't anything to write home about, but this scene definitely had people talking. Released in 2003 and directed by David R. Ellis, Final Destination is a supernatural horror movie starring the likes of Ali Larter, AJ Cook, and Michael Landis. The film is the second installment in the Final Destination series, which of course is a franchise that centers around different groups of people who escape impending death when one individual has a premonition about the accident to come. Then what always happens is they try to warn everyone of what is to come. Some listen, some don't, some live, some die. The ones who survive the accident then begin to die in the order they were supposed to die in the original accident. However, they can avoid death, but if they do, it'll skip to the next person before working its way right back to them. Now, the death always seemed to occur in very strange ways, whether it be the person going about a regular mundane task only for something terrifying to happen, such as you're brushing your teeth and then you fall in the bathtub and die. Going to a tanning bed only for something to fall and trap you in there and then you burn to death. Burn to a crisp. Anyway, the particular death I'm discussing is the one that occurs in Final Destination 2 towards the end of the movie. Now, in this particular scene, a group of survivors trying to cheat death are involved in an accident that sees them swerving off the road and crashing into a pile of PVC pipes that shoot through the windshield, narrowly avoiding the passengers except one. The person in the front seat, Kat, narrowly avoids death with one pipe shooting through the headrest. However, when emergency services arrive, they try to free her from the car, but while doing so, they accidentally aggravate the airbag, which releases, shoving Kat's head into the pole and killing her instantly. It's like this. There's the pole, that's her head. The cigarette she was smoking then drops onto the gasoline and explodes the car, launching barbed wire into the air that goes on to dismember one of the other passengers. It's all sudden, very shocking, and very violent, and I love it. And finally, coming in at number 1, Psycho, the shower scene. Now, while it may seem like the obvious choice, sometimes the obvious choice are the best choices. Released in 1960 and directed by Alfred Hitchcock, Psycho stars the likes of Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates and Janet Leigh as Marion Crane. Crane is an embezzler on the run who hides in an isolated motel run by the shy owner Norman Bates. However, Norman isn't as sweet and innocent as he initially appears to be, but that we don't learn until later on in the movie. What we are told though is that Norman's mother lives in the home up the hill from the motel, and she doesn't seem to be particularly happy that Marion is there. Now, the movie dupes us early on. We're led to believe that Marion is the protagonist, and that we'll be following her over the course of the movie. However, a major plot twist occurs when Marion is taking a shower in her hotel room, only for a shadowy figure who appears to be a woman pulls back the shower curtains and stabs Marion to death. I didn't need to show that. Now, this moment was very shocking but so pivotal, and is perhaps one of the best known scenes in cinematic history. At the time of the release, this type of scene was so unprecedented, resulting in many audience members being completely traumatized. Janet Leigh was deeply impacted by it as well, refusing to take showers afterwards unless she absolutely had to. Now, despite the scene being incredibly graphic, there was actually never a puncture wound shown on screen. It's amazing what lighting can do to trick our minds. Coming in at number 5, Glenn from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Many of you were upset that I didn't include this death in part 1 or part 2 of this series, but Glenn is here now so we can all be happy. Released in 1984 and directed by Wes Craven, A Nightmare on Elm Street stars the likes of Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, Robert Englund, and a young Johnny Depp in his first feature film role, with the movie following 4 teenagers who become tormented by a killer named Freddy Krueger who haunts them in their dreams. However, the kicker is, if Freddy kills them in their dreams, they die in real life. Now, our protagonist is Nancy, a girl who soon realizes that her and her friends might actually be able to pull Freddy out of Dreamworld and into their world, rendering him vulnerable. The friends do their best to stay awake to avoid being terrorized by the vengeful killer. However, this is more difficult than they thought, and Nancy's boyfriend Glenn falls asleep. Nancy tries to save him, but it's already too late, and Freddy has him trapped in Dreamworld. He is sucked inside of his bed, and out of the hole spurts out all of his blood, coating the room completely in his remains. It's a very shocking and sad moment, considering Glenn was the only one who truly believed Nancy. She seemed like fucking bat crazy. In at number 4, Firecracker from Would You Rather. Now, many will argue with me on this one, as Would You Rather had some truly horrific scenes, but this one affected me quite a bit for reasons I don't really know why. You'd think the eye one fucked me up the most, but eh. Released in 2012 and directed by David Guy Levy, Would You Rather stars Brittany Snow as Iris, a woman who attends a dinner party where she must partake in a life or death version of Would You Rather in order to help secure money for her brother's cancer treatment. The game starts off slow with Iris, who is vegetarian, being asked to eat meat. She declines at first, but after getting offered $10,000, she accepts. Like I said, things start slow with stakes being small. However, things escalate quite quickly after that, with would you rathers being tossed around, such as whip the person next to you or be whipped, shock yourself or shock the person next to you, stab yourself or stab the person next to you. Quite intense compared to just eating meat. People are slowly picked off one by one, with not everyone surviving the different rounds, which is exactly how the game was designed. By the end of the movie, there are 4 participants left, with one drawing a card that requires him to light an M80 firecracker in his hand, which seems almost possible if his hand were open. But it wasn't. The firecracker was placed in his hand, with his hand then being taped shut. Then the fuse is lit and bam, his hand explodes clean off in a very grisly moment. It's not the explosion that kills him though, but it does result in a heart attack which leads to his death and rules him out of the game. But even worse, when she gets home her brother's already dead because he OD'd because he didn't want to have cancer. It's actually a really sad ending. She went through literal hell to get money for her brother's cancer treatment, and then she got home and he had OD'd on drugs because he didn't want to live. You're welcome. I want to spoil every movie for everyone. Coming in at number 3, Nail Gun, Final Destination 3. Now, we did discuss Final Destination 3 in part 2 of this series. I specifically spoke about the tanning bed scene. It's iconic at this point. However, there is another scene in Final Destination 3 that is almost just as horrific as the 2 girls being burnt to a crisp, and that is their nail gun scene. Released in 2006 and directed by James Wong, Final Destination 3 is the 3rd installment in the Final Destination series, and once again tells the story of a group of students who avoid death after one of them has a premonition about an accident that will result in their demise. A few people usually survive, ultimately skipping death. However, as you know, you can't avoid death and it will find you one way or another. What then unfolds is the remaining survivors being picked off one by death in the order they would have died in the original accident. It's the same in all the movies. At this point, we're all familiar with the story. Now, in the 3rd installment, a group of students are involved in a roller coaster crash, which hits close to home because roller coasters are fucking great. However, some survive after one of the characters has a premonition, and like I said, they begin to get picked off one by one. Now, in arguably one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, a few survivors are in a Home Depot style shop, with 2 survivors, Erin and Ian, closing up at the end of their shift. Now, protagonists Wendy and Ryan arrive to warn them about their impending doom. They feel like they're gonna die, so they had to warn them. However, every time they do that, the people die anyway, so maybe it's Wendy's fault. However, the pair won't listen and are content that if death comes for them, it is their time. And unfortunately, it was Erin's time. After a runaway forklift knocks into some shelves, Wendy ultimately saves Ian from death, as he was first, with death skipping him and moving on to Erin. Erin then falls onto a nail gun that shoots her repeatedly through the head. It's so incredibly aggressive and shocking, and arguably one of the worst ways to go out in a horror movie. The scene just would not end. She just kept getting shot in the head, the nails poking out of her face. It was disgusting. I also really liked her. She was played by Alex Johnson. Canadian gem. We all remember her from Instant Star, right? In at number 2, Thomas Kane, Alien. I mean, no scene is quite as iconic as the chest burster scene from Alien, and I think many of you were surprised I didn't include it on previous lists, but it's here now. It was just a very obvious pick. Released in 1979 and directed by Ridley Scott, Alien is a science fiction horror movie starring the likes of Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, Veronica Cartwright, John Hurt, and Ian Holm, with it following the crew of the commercial space tug Nostromo, who encounter the eponymous alien, an extraterrestrial that is set loose on their ship. Now, we learn quickly that throughout the movie that the alien is capable of using humans as hosts to carry their offspring, and this is what goes down with Thomas Kane, played by John Hurt. I'm 90% sure it's John Hurt. It's not Ian Holm. Whatever. Who is attacked by one of the creatures. Unbeknownst to him, he is now one growing inside of him, and this is revealed during the breakfast scene. Kane eats some food but begins to cough, seemingly choking. However, he isn't choking. The alien inside of him is just trying to be set free. As the crew lay him on the table, he writhes around in pain before blood begins to spurt from his chest, and then before we know it, the phallic-looking alien bursts out, shocking all of the crew in the process. Now, the greatest part of this scene is the simple fact that the other actors weren't clued in as to what was about to take place, so their reactions are quite literally their genuine reactions. One woman even passed out, as you would. Not me though, I'd put my hand in his chest with it. What? And finally, in at number 1 we have Christabella from Silent Hill. We're revisiting Silent Hill with this number, however this time there might actually be a death to top Pyramid Head ripping off someone's skin with one pull, believe it or not. Christabella, if you know, you know. Released in 2006 and directed by Christoph Gans, Silent Hill is a video game adaptation that stars Radha Mitchell, Sean Bean and Laurie Holden, and like I said in part 2, it follows Rose, a woman who is forced to take her adoptive daughter Sharon to a mysterious town called Silent Hill, after she begins to cry out for it during her sleep. Now the town is not as it seems, with it being filled to the brim with disturbing entities and a deadly local cult. Now while the skin ripping scene was absolutely disgusting and incredibly shocking, there is one death that is arguably worse, and that is the death of Christabella. Christabella is the high priestess of the Brethren, the cult. She burns those deemed as witches in order to prevent the apocalypse and maintain a sinless existence. She's quite literally the least fun person in any room. Now towards the end of the movie, the cult is gathered in the church with Christabella burning one of our protagonists, Sybil, to death, and intends to do the same to Rose. Now, backstory quickly. Sharon, the daughter, resembles a young girl named Alessa, a young girl who was burned by the Brethren. Now, the town's cult believes Rose, Sybil, and Sharon to be witches simply because of Sharon resembling Alessa. It is revealed that Alessa was involved in a ritual which went awry, with Alessa manifesting as Dark Alessa, and is responsible for shifting the dimensions of Silent Hill. Backstory over. Rose confronts Christabella but is ultimately stabbed by the High Priestess. However, her blood ultimately summons Alessa and Dark Alessa, who bisect and kill Christabella with razor wire. And the razor wire literally goes everywhere. Everywhere. I just can't say where, but just imagine. In an absolutely grisly scene that is still difficult to watch. It's a lot of a lot. In at number 5, the rat trap from Saw 3. This death is perhaps one of the more standouts in the Saw franchise, with the trap being one that no one would ever wish to be stuck in. Released in 2006 and directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, Saw 3 is the third installment in the Saw franchise and stars the likes of Tobin Bell, Donnie Wahlberg, Shawnee Smith, Angus McFadden, and Dina Meyer. With it following Jeff, a man whose son was killed by a drunk driver and is put through a series of tests by the killer, Jigsaw. These tests, however, are meant to help him overcome his anger towards his son's killer. Meanwhile, John Kramer, aka Jigsaw, is now bedridden, dying of cancer, as his apprentice, Amanda Young, must kidnap a doctor to help save his life. It's all very dramatic. Now, arguably the worst trap in the movie, and perhaps one of the worst in the entire franchise, is the rat trap. Jeff's third test in the movie involves Timothy Young, the driver who killed his son. He is attached to a machine that will twist his limbs and head if he is not freed in time. In order to free him, Jeff must grab a key from inside a box. Easy enough, but when the key is pulled, it will fire a bullet directly at him. Is he willing to take a bullet for the man who killed his son? That's the question. He ultimately retrieves the key, but it is too late. Timothy is already dead. His head went like this. Dead. Before we jump into number 4, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, it really helps us out a lot. Coming in at number 4, we have Georgie from It. Now, it should be noted that It has always been terrifying, whether it be the novel, the TV miniseries, or the 2017 movie. However, the latter certainly stepped it up in the blood department, with the death of Georgie being far more terrifying than what was shown in the miniseries. Released in 2017 and directed by Andy Muschietti, It Chapter 1 is a supernatural horror that stars the likes of Jaden Lieberher, Bill Skarsgård, Finn Wolfhard, and Sophia Lillis, with it following the story of 7 children in Derry, Maine who are terrorized by the eponymous being known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Now the movie kicks off with a bang, with Georgie, the younger brother of Bill, heading out into the rain to play with this paper boat that his brother made him. He puts it in the stream as it floats down the street and towards a storm drain, where inside is hiding Pennywise. The boat drops in and Georgie bends down to try and retrieve it, only to be greeted by Pennywise, who tries to lower him down into the drain with him. However, Georgie doesn't wish to and wants to leave. He attempts to grab the boat back from Pennywise, but as he sticks his hand into the drain, Pennywise bites it clean off. Georgie tries to crawl away, but he's sucked right back into the drain, where he will float to forever and ever and ever. It's very, very sad and terrifying. Poor Georgie didn't stand a chance. That's why you don't play outside. Simple as. Also, don't play with a paper boat. I can think of so many better things to play with. Coming in at number 3, Bloodbath, Hostel Part 2. Hostel was a tough film to get through, that's for sure, yet it was genuinely good and a movie I frequently return to. Hostel Part 2, however, too much and not entirely the most enjoyable to sit through. Released in 2007 and directed once again by Eli Roth, Hostel Part 2 stars the likes of Lauren German, Roger Bart, Heather Matarazzo and Richard Georgie, with the plot following 3 American female art students in Rome who head to a Slovak village and subsequently get kidnapped and tortured by rich clients who pay to torture and kill poor people. Lovely stuff, how pleasant. The movie, like its predecessor, is incredibly gruesome and grisly. However, there is one particular scene that stands out above the rest, and anyone who has seen the movie knows exactly what I'm talking about. The bloodbath. One of the female students, Lorna, is kidnapped while on a boat and awakes to find herself hung upside down above a bathtub and naked. A woman enters, laying in the bathtub, and proceeds to torture Lorna while bathing in her blood while she slowly dies. This scene was particularly difficult to watch simply because of how innocently they portrayed Lorna. She was so defenseless, you just wanted to help her, and the way she died was so degrading and horrific that you couldn't help but look away as it was happening. You somehow felt like an accomplice to the entire thing. In at number 2 we have tanning beds from Final Destination 3. Now, while I could touch on the main roller coaster crash in Final Destination 3, I think we can all agree that the tanning bed scene was perhaps one of the most disturbing scenes in any horror movie. Released in 2006 and directed by James Wong, Final Destination 3 is the 3rd installment in the Final Destination franchise and stars the likes of Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Alex Johnson, Tony Todd and Ryan Merriman, with the movie following Wendy Christensen, a high school graduate who has a vision that a roller coaster her and her friends are on will derail and kill them all. Like all the previous films, she manages to save a few, but as we know, you can't cheat death, and death begins claiming each of the survivors in the order that they would have died on the coaster. However, Wendy is smart and she soon realizes that photographs she took the day at the amusement park may be clues as to how the classmates might die. Using this knowledge, she tries to save them all. Now, Ashley and Ashlyn are 2 girls who got off the coaster, but sadly they go on to have one of the worst deaths imaginable, inside a tanning bed. The 2 girls go tanning, but unbeknownst to them, their Slurpees are leaking and coincidentally dripping water into the breaker. For some reason, this results in the tanning beds heating up in temperature, more and more and more. You would think this would be the perfect opportunity to get out, but no, it's too late. The AC then begins to blow cold air in, hitting a coat rack that falls into a plant that lands on a shelf that falls on top of the tanning beds, preventing them from opening them. Classic move. The temperature gets hotter, the bed begins to malfunction, and the 2 girls burn to a crisp. R.I.P. And finally, in at number 1 we have Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. This one is an absolute doozy, and in the worst way possible. A lot of you folks requested this death, so here it is. Released in 2006 and directed by Christoph Gans, Silent Hill stars the likes of Radha Mitchell, Sean Bean, Laurie Holden and Kim Coates, with it following Rose, a mother who is forced to take her adopted daughter Sharon to the town of Silent Hill, after she starts crying for it during her sleep. However, Silent Hill is more than they bargained for, with Sharon going missing and Rose being forced to look for her, only to discover that the town is filled to the brim with unearthly creatures and an evil local cult. But more terrifying still, inside of Silent Hill is Pyramid Head, arguably the scariest monster of them all. Pyramid Head is a humanoid monster clad in butcher's attire, who wields a great knife and a great spear. In the film universe, Pyramid Head arrives in the town of Silent Hill when the town transitions into the other world. Throughout the movie, Pyramid Head attempts to kill Rose, but is unsuccessful. However, during one particular chase scene, he pursues the protagonist to a church where they ultimately manage to escape. One person isn't so lucky though. One member of the town's cult is left behind, with Pyramid Head emerging, grabbing her, tearing off her clothes, and then proceeds to tear off her skin in one go, throwing it at the church doors as Rose closes them, blood residue still managing to seep in. Such a quick but incredibly aggressive and unexpected scene, one that has definitely lingered with Silent Hill fans for years. Also, an interesting piece of information which I'm just learning now: Silent Hill DLC has been added to Dead by Daylight. Apparently it was added last summer, I didn't know. I don't know how I missed it. I love that game. If you want to play as Pyramid Head, you can. Also, this isn't sponsored, I'm just a big fan of Dead by Daylight.